Have you ever stopped to wonder what lengths someone might go to feel accepted? Imagine looking into the eyes of someone you trust deeply, someone you've shared countless memories with, only to realize they've betrayed you in the most horrific way possible. Could you have seen it coming, or would the signs have slipped past unnoticed? Tonight, we journey into the heart of the Dutcher family's tragedy, a case that began with the promise of a peaceful New Year's celebration and unraveled into betrayal, manipulation, and loss. This is the story of a young boy, his devoted grandparents, and a friendship destroyed by the dark allure of belonging. Housevil, true crime involving family. Every family has secrets, any family can cross the line. Hi, I'm Matt, and welcome to Housevil, where we explore the haunting stories of family bonds turned tragic. Today, we uncover the heartbreaking tale of the Dutcher family, a story of love and trust shattered by manipulation and violence. Together, we'll walk through their lives, the moments leading to their tragic end, and the unsettling forces that set everything in motion. The Dutchers were an ordinary, loving family, the kind whose lives revolved around each other in a way that felt unshakable. At the heart of their world was 15-year-old Tony Dutcher, a bright, curious boy with a love for adventure and an infectious zest for life. Born on May 2nd, 1985, in Colorado Springs, Tony was the kind of teenager who seemed destined for great things. He was driven by a passion for learning, immersing himself in music, martial arts, and languages. Tony's ambition was boundless. He was teaching himself German, Latin, and Japanese, dreaming of a future as a military translator, an aspiration that blended his love for languages with his respect for his family's military heritage. His father, Charles, spoke of Tony's endless curiosity and generous spirit, fondly recalling the simple joys his son found in life. Whether it was hiking in the Colorado mountains, strumming his cello, or collecting Sobe bottles just because he thought they were cool, Tony's enthusiasm was contagious. But more than anything, Tony valued his family. His bond with his paternal grandparents, Carl and Joanna Dutcher, was especially close. Carl, a retired military veteran and licensed arms dealer, was a steady presence in Tony's life. His years of discipline and service shaped him into a man who valued loyalty and family above all else. Joanna, quieter but no less loving, brought a warmth to their home that made it a sanctuary for their grandson. Every visit from Tony filled their home with laughter and life. On December 31st, 2000, the Dutchers welcomed Tony to their house to celebrate the new year, as they had many times before. Tony arrived with a plan. He was excited about spending the night camping out in the fort he had built on the hill overlooking their property. For Tony, the fort was more than just a structure. It was a personal sanctuary, a space where he could dream and feel free. Carl and Joanna were delighted to have their grandson there. They adored the energy and excitement he brought into their lives, and they couldn't wait to hear about all the things he had been working on. It was supposed to be a quiet, joyful celebration, a night of family bonding to ring in a new year. But as they sat together that evening, none of them could have known the darkness that was about to descend. What began as an ordinary holiday would soon spiral into a night of unthinkable tragedy, shattering their family and leaving a void that would never be filled. January 1st, 2001 came and went without a word from the Dutchers. It was unusual, but not immediately alarming. After all, the holiday season often brought busy days filled with family gatherings and celebration. But as hours turned into days with no communication, concern began to grow. The phone calls went unanswered, and neighbors noticed an eerie stillness around the Dutcher home. Something was wrong. Finally, unable to ignore the sinking feeling that something terrible had happened, loved ones called the police to perform a welfare check. Officers arrived at the Dutcher residence, a modest home that had once been filled with warmth and love. But as they stepped inside, it became clear that this was no longer a place of joy. Carl and Joanna Dutcher were found lifeless, victims of gunshot wounds that ended their lives in a cruel instant. The house, once a sanctuary for family gatherings, had been transformed into a grim and silent crime scene. But the horror didn't stop there. As officers searched the house, they noticed a glaring absence. Tony, the couple's 15-year-old grandson, was nowhere to be found. The missing boy raised even more questions. Was Tony another victim taken from the home before he could be found? Or could he, against all odds, have been involved in the violence? Desperate for answers, investigators turned to Tony's mother, Jennifer, for help. Through her tears, Jennifer told police about the fort her son had built, a makeshift sanctuary on the hill above his grandparents' home. Officers climbed the hill, the cold wind biting at their faces, and what they found there would haunt them forever. Tony's body lay inside his sleeping bag, as though he'd been preparing to drift off to sleep in the safety of his fort. But the reality was far more chilling. His throat had been slit with such force that it was nearly severed, a wound so brutal it was difficult to comprehend. Nearby, a Scrabble board lay on the ground, its pieces scattered mid-game. The sight was devastating, evidence that Tony had not been alone that night. Someone had been with him, sitting by his side in what should have been a moment of comfort and companionship, only to turn on him in an act of horrific betrayal. As investigators began piecing together the puzzle, a name surfaced again and again: Isaac Grimes, Tony's best friend, the boy who had shared countless memories with him. But as detectives would soon learn, Isaac had secrets of his own, dark and dangerous secrets that would cast a long shadow over the tragedy. Isaac and Tony had once been the kind of best friends who seemed inseparable, the kind whose childhoods were marked by shared adventures, laughter, and an unspoken bond. They had built forts, swapped secrets, and dreamed about the future together. But as high school began, something shifted. Tony's vibrant and social nature found new paths, while Isaac, quiet and withdrawn, felt the sting of loneliness. It was during this vulnerable time that Isaac encountered Simon Sue, an older student whose charisma seemed almost magnetic. Simon wasn't just confident, he was commanding. He exuded the kind of presence that drew people in, and for a boy like Isaac, starved for connection, Simon's attention was intoxicating. Simon wasn't an ordinary senior, though. He was the self-appointed leader of the Operations and Reconnaissance Agents, or ORA, a group he described as a tight-knit club. On the surface, it seemed harmless, even intriguing. A boys' club where members trained together, supported each other, and shared a sense of purpose. But beneath its facade lay a darker reality. Simon wove elaborate stories about coups, military missions, and rebellion, painting ORA as something extraordinary. He convinced the boys that they were part of something bigger, something vital. For Isaac, the promises of belonging and purpose were irresistible. He finally felt like he had a place, a group where he mattered. But Simon's influence came with a price. His loyalty came not through kindness, but through fear and manipulation. He controlled his followers with a calculated mix of flattery and intimidation. Simon demanded Isaac's absolute obedience, subjecting him to bizarre rituals and relentless psychological pressure. He even ordered Isaac to hand over photos of his family members and copies of their house keys, using threats to ensure compliance. Isaac, overwhelmed and terrified, complied, unsure of how to escape Simon's grip. In Simon's warped mind, loyalty required a test, a demonstration of Isaac's willingness to do anything for the group. The Dutcher family became his chosen target. Carl, a military veteran and licensed arms dealer, became a fixation for Simon, who believed the family would serve as the ultimate test of Isaac's devotion. On that fateful New Year's Eve, Isaac met Tony at the fort, a sanctuary Tony had built to escape and dream. For a time, it was as if nothing had changed between them. They played Scrabble and talked, just as they had when they were boys. But Isaac carried a dark command in his heart, a mission he felt he had no choice but to complete. As Tony looked out into the distance, Isaac seized the moment. Distracting his best friend with talk of a light in the distance, Isaac struck, slashing Tony's throat in an act of betrayal so profound it defied comprehension. The bond they had once shared was severed in the cruelest way imaginable. Meanwhile, at the Dutcher home, another member of ORA, John Matheny, carried out Simon's broader plan. John entered the house, where Carl and Joanna, who had welcomed Tony into their home with love, were shot and killed. The boys ransacked the house, stealing Carl's collection of weapons before fleeing into the night. The crimes were as senseless as they were brutal, leaving behind shattered lives and a trail of questions. How could a bond as deep as Tony and Isaac's end in such violence? And how could Simon, with nothing but words and charisma, lead these boys down such a dark path? The arrests that followed peeled back the layers of Simon's sinister influence, exposing a chilling dynamic of control and fear. Isaac, just 15 at the time, confessed to the murder of his best friend Tony, claiming he acted out of terror, fear for his own life, and for the safety of his family. John admitted to being involved in the events, but denied ever pulling the trigger, insisting his role was less violent than Isaac claimed. And Simon, the so-called mastermind behind it all, cast himself as a misunderstood figure, denying responsibility and rejecting the label of manipulative leader that others placed upon him. The sentences were harsh. Isaac received 60 years for his direct role in Tony's murder. John was handed a 66-year sentence, and Simon, convicted of conspiracy and organized crime, was sentenced to 53 years. But the ripple effects of their actions left scars far deeper than the legal outcomes could address. For Tony's mother, Jennifer, the grief was insurmountable. The loss of her son, her parents, and the life she had known pushed her into a spiral of despair. She attempted suicide multiple times, her sorrow too heavy to bear. One fateful night, in a haze of pain and alcohol, Jennifer drove the wrong way down a highway, causing a crash that killed a 27-year-old man. Sentenced to 5 years in prison, Jennifer carried the weight of that tragedy alongside the unbearable loss of her family. And yet, from the depths of her anguish, Jennifer found a path to forgiveness. She reached out to Isaac, the boy who had killed her son, choosing to see him not only as a perpetrator but also as a victim, manipulated and broken under Simon's influence. Her decision to forgive wasn't easy, nor was it free from criticism, but it became a remarkable testament to the resilience of the human spirit. In the face of unimaginable pain, Jennifer found a way to turn toward compassion, proving that even amidst the darkest tragedies, there's a glimmer of humanity that can guide the way forward. This case forces us to confront deeply unsettling questions. Questions that don't have easy answers. How do we identify manipulation before it takes root and spirals into something deadly? How do we recognize when a vulnerable person like Isaac is being drawn into the wrong orbit? And what can we do to pull them back? And what about Tony? A bright, kind-hearted boy whose life was cut short in an act of betrayal so brutal that he could never have seen it coming. The Dutcher family's story is a sobering reminder of how fragile trust can be, how quickly it can be twisted into a weapon, and how devastating the consequences of unchecked influence can become. It makes us question the dynamics we overlook in our daily lives, the power of subtle manipulation, the dangers of blind loyalty, and the tragic cost of ignoring warning signs that seem insignificant until it's too late. This is more than a story of love and loss. It's a story of innocence destroyed, of a family torn apart by forces they could never have anticipated. But amidst the heartbreak, it's also a story of resilience, of the strength it takes to rebuild in the face of overwhelming darkness. It reminds us of the courage required to confront what's broken, to seek understanding, and to find even the smallest glimmer of light in the darkest corners of human experience. The Dutcher family's tragedy leaves us with more questions than answers, but perhaps that's precisely why their story is so important to share. It compels us to reflect not just on the horror of what happened, but on the vulnerabilities that exist within us, all the silent cracks in our relationships, the unnoticed cries for help, and the unseen forces that can twist trust into betrayal. Their story serves as a stark reminder to look deeper at the dynamics we often take for granted, at the people we choose to let into our lives, and at the subtle shifts in behavior that can signal something is terribly wrong. It challenges us to confront uncomfortable truths about the human condition, how easily some can manipulate, how blindly others can follow, and how fragile the bonds of loyalty and love can become under pressure. By examining the tragedy of the Dutcher family, we are also forced to turn inward, questioning our own judgments, our own vigilance, and the choices we make every day that shape not only our lives, but the lives of those around us. Their loss is heartbreaking, but their story holds the power to teach us, if only we're willing to listen. If you found this story as haunting and compelling as I did, don't forget to subscribe to Housevil for more explorations into the dark truths hidden within family bonds. Share your thoughts in the comments below. How do you think we can prevent stories like this from happening again? Thank you for joining me tonight, and I'll see you in the next one.